dream. Just a dream, right? A nightmare? No. This is your execution. The people you walk alongside have collected together over several days. You're all convicted criminals, but there is strength in numbers. From the things you can always hear in the Badlands, those things come after you when the sun goes down. Keep moving, for the lights of Amnesty beckon you forward to survival, to a new start.
Hi, welcome to Once Upon a LARPer. My name is Aislinn and I document LARPs, events, and travel so that you can experience them through your screen. Today I want to talk about Amnesty, a Southern Gothic LARP. I had the honor of attending the debut Above Snakes in March of 2022. I'd like to say that I'm putting this video out now because it's thematically appropriate, but it's really because I had a lot of life stuff get in the way of editing. This is a game run by King Heron Events, who runs other games in the area, such as Lands of Exile and, coming in December, Requiem, a zombie horror survival LARP. Amnesty started as an idle thought experiment, as explained by the creators Robert Nunley and Rachel Rooker. Rachel put most of the ideas and setting into motion, while Robert helped to flesh it out into a game playable by LARPers.
My name is Rachel. I am the world builder for Amnesty, along with my partner Rob, who handles things much more on like a logistics and rules side of thing, but I am the major player as far as the world building, the world lore, the culture, and stuff like that. Honestly, it wasn't really a conversation. It was just like the seed of an idea for a game that I thought might be fun to play. You know that saying, to bake a cake from scratch, you must first invent the universe. So in order to think through what those kinds of game mechanics might look like, I first had to figure out, okay, what is this game's setting? Why is anyone in this location? Why is everyone fighting monsters with toy guns instead of doing literally anything else? Never had any ambitions for it to turn into an actual game. It was just something fun for me to think about. The conversation that kind of triggered putting this into like the real world instead of just my own personal brain space. I was on a road trip with Rob, and he asked like a conversation starter, what is your dream LARP? Then eventually we were chatting with Emil about it, just casually. Emil of King Heron Productions, who also runs Lands of Exile now. And they got really excited about the idea, asked if they could run the game for us.
My name's Rob Nunley. I am the head of plot and one of the founders of Amnesty. I took a lot of inspiration from horror tabletop games and from like some horror video games as well. Things like Amnesia: The Dark Descent. In terms of fear and dread, we wanted a couple things. The big thing is we wanted it to be a very lethal game. We wanted the threat of death as a character to be very real. However, it's also not necessarily super fun when a character dies. You know, dying in a lot of LARPs isn't fun. We wanted to make death fun, and that's where we got, you know, the other scenes. And the second part is something that we've made very clear in like the rule book and in rules discussions is mechanically, players use the rule book. Monsters don't. Following the rules is only a thing that human characters have to deal with. There's a lot of monsters that like you don't know necessarily what they're going to call or what they're capable of.
The full interviews will be up shortly about the creation of this game, and I will link to it below with other links too. So as Rachel mentions in her interview, the inspiration for Amnesty was a lot of Southern Gothic as a genre. Southern Gothic literature, music, generally as an art form, really inspired her to make the aesthetics and the world of this game. The game is run out of Elizabethtown, North Carolina, at one of the camps built by Boy Scouts. I did a little tour of the campsite on my TikTok, which you can also see here on my reels. However, the setting of the game takes place in a much different world. There's the city, safe within the walls, and outside of the walls, the Badlands. The city was the last standing parapet of civilization, and you got yourself exiled. If you were exiled, it's because you have been determined guilty of one of the 7 exilable crimes. And the one thing you do know is that being exiled is not just a punishment, it's a death sentence. Bandits, highwaymen, and other exiled people are the least of your worries in the Badlands. When the sun goes down, monsters come out, hungry, hunting. People can be easily fought, but it's easier for you to band together in a group searching for somewhere to lay down roots again. Monsters can also be fought, though not as easily. But then there is one thing that you cannot fight. There is only the other, to which you surrender. The other clings to you and everything in the Badlands, hanging over like a thick fog. All we know is that it cannot be fought, and it cannot be killed. Your only hope with the other is to reason with it. And reasoning always leads to a cruel bargain. There is some hope, however. Some exiles broke bread some time ago and forged what would come together to be the town of Amnesty. If you make it to Amnesty, where all is wiped clean, you sign the compact, serve the community, and fight for survival together. Do no harm to Amnesty, and it will do no harm to you. So I'm sure you know, media definitely influences a lot of LARPs. Everything from the very classic Lord of the Rings to sci-fi elements to literature, music, and art. Amnesty forged a kind of conglomerate of aesthetics, from Southern to Western to a little bit of Victorian. People walked around with different accents and different costuming, but all lended themselves to the Southern Gothic aesthetic of this game. This extended itself to the expectations of roleplay and vernacular even. For the debut of the game, I created my own character, Rosalie Nora Constance, who was 31 at the time of her exile. She was raised in the slums by a poor mother and father that had fallen in love and given birth to twins. When her twin died, her mother projected all of her hopes onto Rosalie, grooming her for high society one day. When she got a job working for the very influential Bennett family, one of the sons took a liking to her when she saw her steal a book from the library and squirreled herself away to read quietly to herself. She and the son, Curtis Bennett, got married shortly after and gave birth to their own daughter, Beatrice. Being the stubborn, somewhat hot-headed, and very independent woman that she was, Rosalie still insisted on working, even as a mother, so the Bennetts gave her head of the family restaurant. Soon, though, she found herself caught up in some of her old ways, with some of her old friends, and she formed with them the Red Eye, a criminal ring. They dealt in everything from bootlegging to smuggling to arson, all exilable crimes. But Rosalie always made sure that someone else took the fall. So whenever I came into the game as Rosalie Nora Constance, instead of Rosalie Nora Bennett, I was playing a woman pretending to be a widow, claiming that she was framed for the murder of her husband, whereas those were not the exilable crimes for which she was tried, and some of the people in the Badlands with her knew that. Dressed in all black, veil and all, I pretended to be a widow, while scoping out who might know my dirty little secrets. As the debut, there were no one who had played this before, so there was a couple directed cast waiting for us, and the rest of us were led in a group that had banded together, and we came across Amnesty almost completely empty. There was a sheriff who was willing to sign us to the compact whenever we were ready. But people had just mysteriously been missing. And that's where the game kicked off. There were no lack of monsters. Honestly, absolutely horrifying. There was a part where a man in a pig mask with a bloody cleaver ran at me, and I tripped over my cane and my skirts into the sand, and he like Naruto ran at me and stood over me, and I was genuinely afraid, like out of character afraid. They did a very good job of setting up the immersion, especially when it was dark, to really instill that paranoia and fear, so whenever something does happen, kind of jolts you. There's also PvP, which if you don't know stands for player versus player. Characters don't always get along, especially when you're playing criminals. I was intentionally playing a bad, manipulative person with a soft spot for children. So when a child was brought into town and everyone started to get really weird feelings about it, and they decided to sacrifice it, they found out that it was just a puppet. Some kind of dark, twisted magic in the Badlands. But Rosalie had no clue. So within the first hour of being there, I may or may not have shot the same person twice. Thank you so much, Princess, for being a good sport. And naturally, that turned other characters against me. There was even a bounty put on my head after the first time I shot her, and I was detained after the second, handcuffed and dragged across the sand. It was really fun to explore the different relationships you could have. I particularly took part in a lot of the high socialite status groups. There are all kinds of relationships to be formed and fostered at LARP, and that's what I loved about playing this character in particular, is I didn't want to be liked. I had no need to be liked. The only thing that Rosalie cared about was finding out that her daughter was safe. At one point during one of the days we were playing, I went on my NPC shift, and they decided as characters to do something quite brutal to me as I was playing a bandit. Through the power of roleplay, I went through a lot of extreme pain, some would call it torture, and whenever I went back to our what we call ops, the creator of the game asked me and said, "Do you want to take your NPC shift early and come back tonight?" And I considered it for a minute and agreed to it because I'm a very big fan of intense roleplay. So that night they had me come back as a torture banshee. I was dressed in white and black. They poured blood all over me and put a ghost shroud over my head. I got within a couple yards of the fort and let out the most blood-curdling scream I could. The next day my voice was gone, but the good news is I almost made someone pee themselves. I got to wander around waiting for someone to either help lay me to rest or get revenge on the people who did it to me. And that instantly spurred my love of NPCing for horror events. I learned about myself that I'm not very good at hiding my fear at all, but I kind of did like dressing up and participating in being the fear factor. So whenever I went back to ops, they dressed me up as a boo hag, one who carves off the faces of others to use as a mask. Once I was done playing that one and got to give someone a really cool little experience of shooting me point blank, it was really fun to just hit the floor and play dead. I got sent out as a watcher. These things were always around at Amnesty. They were watching you from the woods in the dark, and they really helped set up the paranoia that we were constantly supposed to be feeling of being watched, because we were. I was put in a full spider morph suit and a head covered in eyeballs and mangled flesh. I took it a little bit of the extra mile. Thankfully, I had someone with me to make sure I could see where I was going, but once I was somewhere somewhat dimly lit, I contorted on the ground, kind of creeped around, just kind of instilling that, why is this thing looking at me? So overall, I really enjoyed the playing of a character at Amnesty and also the NPCing aspect. The creators, Emil, Robert, and Rachel, along with the rest of the staff, did a phenomenal job of debuting this game and have been running it all year, hoping to extend into next year. I think that Amnesty is a thrilling horror experience for LARPers. Even if you're new to the hobby, I think there's something there for everyone. So if you are interested in checking out this game or any other of King Heron's experiences in LARPs, you can check the link below. I'd like to give a special thanks to King Heron events, Rachel, Rob, and Emil, and any player participants who offered up their photos, videos, etc. for the purposes of this video. This game truly had some unique properties that I just haven't experienced in LARP, everywhere from directed cast to the way that hit points work, right down to the rules and logistics up to roleplay and interactions with staff and characters alike. So if you like this video, make sure you hit the little thumbs up. That would make me so excited and happy in knowing what to make next. And with that, I'd like to leave you with a little outro I made via the player participants. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you think I should once upon next.